Hi ambassadors, now we're over here at St. John's. Typically a St. John's tour is going to start here in the Abbey, but you'll be given a tour route, so don't worry too much about that. It might not be exactly the same as what we go through today. When you get over here, remember to introduce yourself to your group, name, major, year, all that kind of good stuff. And then once you're in the Abbey, a lot of the stuff that we talk about here is going to be the same things that we talked about over at St. Ben's at the chapel. So things like make sure you mention mass times, the honeycomb structure, that little story, theology requirement, things like that. Once you're done here in the Abbey, I usually head towards the beach where we kind of do a little overview of all the outdoor activities here at St. John's.
Hi guys, we've now made it to an overlook of the beach, which you'll see when you come and get a shadow tour where we're actually standing. But once we get to the spot, we're usually talking about all the different ways our students can get outside. We talk about the 7 different lakes on campus, our Outdoors Leadership Center and all of their services with canoes and camping gear. Talk about all of the trail system through the Arboretum. Really emphasize that our students like to get outside and be active even in the winter. Another thing that we like to rope in here is a joke about our beautiful chapel, say Stella Marie's Chapel, across the way, and that it's about a 1.5 mile walk out, and that one of our ringing jokes on campus is that if Benny and Johnny walk hand in hand, ring by spring. So people usually get a kick out of that, and I usually say that's definitely not the case for me. But yeah. Then we're gonna walk to Pengle, and on that walk I usually start talking about my classes, my course schedule a little bit, because we're gonna go to the academic side.
Okay guys, so now we are in Peter Engel Science Center, or Pengle. Usually in here I'll talk about the same things that I talked about in Ardolph Science Center over at St. Ben's. So I'll show them a classroom and talk about small class sizes, lots of interaction with your professors, as well as group-based and discussion-based classes. Typically, after I'm done up here, I'll make the trek down to New Science Center where I'll go into an introductory biolab. On that walk, usually I'll talk about some stories that I have from classes. My FYS was in this building, so I'll talk about FYS and all that entails. And then once you get down to the biolab, typically there's going to be a representative from the biology department there to discuss with students all the things our biolabs have to offer and how our unique setting on this big arboretum really leads to some pretty amazing experiences for our science students.
Okay, so we've made it to Clemens Stadium. We walked from the New Science Center to here. You'll see that on your shadow tour, the route that you would take. But we walked past the Alcuin Library. We weren't able to go in today. I'm sure we'll come out with another video later about the new upgrades they've made to the Alcuin Library, along with the new spaces provided in our new Reinhardt Learning Commons. So stay tuned for that. But once you get here, make sure that this is a long walk from the New Science Center to Clemens Stadium, and that's where people become a little bit disengaged, and that's when you really need to shine as a tour guide to make sure that they're paying attention to everything you're saying. So how I do that usually is by walking alongside of them. I crank out my strong voice, and I usually am talking about, it kind of depends on the group, but I'll talk about different activities that I'm involved in. I'll talk about any stories that I have about studying or classes, things like that. That's when you really need to kind of read your group and figure out what they're really interested in listening to. It can be hard when you have a big group, but just being really excited will make them stay tuned to you. Once you get to Clemens Stadium, this is a really fun area because everyone's excited about Johnny football. So I usually talk about how there's nothing like Collegeville in the fall during the football seasons. Our really great program here at St. John's and our great football team, how we attract a lot of people to these games, that we hold the record for attendance for D3 football games. Talk about the Johnny Tommy. Never put down the Tommies, but you can make a very subtle joke maybe if you want to. Just read the group. You never know who you're gonna have on tour, so that's something you have to be careful about. You can call this the Red Bowl because you can mention how all of the trees change colors during the football season. I always crack the joke that we're known for our track team, and people kind of get a kick out of that. But Other than that, come pull your experiences together. I talk about the Rat Pack. Everyone they always think that's kind of funny. And talk about how we get really excited about our sports teams, and that makes our community that much stronger. Okay, so now we've made it down to the Palestra. It kind of depends on the shadow tour that you have in the tour guide, but people usually take some leeway in what route to take down here, and how much of the space that we show. This is when you need to read your tour group, because you may have someone that is not really interested in athletics, and like you want to talk about the other things on campus that you can do besides just athletics, because we really emphasize how good our football team is, but there might be someone that isn't that interested in that. So when you come down here, you can talk about intramurals and rock climbing wall and our racket courts and stuff like that. You can also talk about our weight room back here, about how it's a little more weight focused versus aerobic at St. Ben's, and that Benny's have access to this just as much as Johnny's. Also, you can talk about our Sexton Arena and the basketball games. I like to talk about the basketball games just because I think that they're really fun. And also the indoor track. Then you can move over and talk about what's across the street, the brand new dome, the brand new baseball field. But this is really, remember, when you need to figure out, read your crowd, what they're interested in, and see if they're interested in athletics to see how much you need to talk about it. Other than that, this is kind of a space that kind of makes it a little bit optional for tours. But then you can also talk about John Glardy and his fame and success. You can talk about, again, all those intramural and club sports. So, all right.
All right, guys, so now we are in Sexton. We walked over from the Palestra. As you're walking from the Palestra, remember to cross the street only at crosswalks. That's super important. It's about a liability issue, and we get in big trouble if we don't do that. So cross at the crosswalks, and then remember that that's a really long walk. So again, keep your group really engaged. Try to figure out what they are interested in talking about. Usually on that walk, I'll talk about the bus system and how the link works, as well as my own personal story about how I got to St. Ben's and St. John's and how I wanted to go to St. Thomas for all my life and blah, 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 all that. So just kind of find some good stories to tell, and try to engage them to ask what they're interested in, how their last year of high school is going, all that kind of stuff. Once you are in Sexton, we usually come in through downstairs, and I'll point out Johnny Java's student-run coffee shop. You can use your meal plan flex dollars there, as well as the bookstore, lots of Johnny apparel, how it's very dangerous. Every time I go in there, I buy lots of stuff, as well as I buy all my books through the bookstore. And then we come up here and I'll show them the dining hall in Sexton and talk about how this is where you can use your one punch a day if you're a Benny. Kind of talk about the differences in meal plans between Benny plans first and second year, and then the Johnny plans, how you get a few more options. And then next we are going to head over to Tommy Hall or Simon's Hall.
Okay, so now we walked from Sexton, and then if you have a boy on tour, you can typically take them into Tommy Hall. There's a showroom in there that you'll get the number for. Remember to say residence hall and first year residence hall instead of freshman dorms. A little more professional. Then talk in the room a little bit about the same things that we talked about in the St. Ben's showroom, about rooming, their roommates. You can talk about lofting their bed, talk about the brother on their floor that has Johnny bread nights, little fun things that they put on for you. Talk about how housing gets better as you get older. You can talk about the Flinttown apartments, anything, take it and run with it. Just really emphasize that we like our students to stay on campus for 4 years and that we have the necessary things to do that. Then once you come out of the residence hall, we typically go into Simon's, into the Eugene McCarthy Center, where we will have someone talking in there about our McCarthy Center and all of the programs that they help us out with, the DC internships, the different talks that they put on throughout the year, the politics in a pint. That's also something you need to talk about in Sexton, is all the different things that Brother Willie's puts on. So theology on tap, politics in a pint, all of those, praise in the pub, all of those different events that students can go to during the week. that really shows that we have a lot of campus life and that students stay on campus and want to be a part of those things. Really talk about all of those because students, they know that they're going to go to school, but they want to hear about everything else that they can do too. Also, if you go into Simons Hall, remember to say Simons. It's not Simmons. That kind of gets miscommunicated, and you never know who you're going to have on tour. So we've actually had like the Simons that was here on tour and had to correct us. Then after that, if you didn't show a classroom in Pengal, make sure you show a classroom in there to talk about those same things we've talked about before. All right, now we're going to walk to the refectory.
All right, so we are in the refectory right now. We just walked over from Simons Hall. In here, I usually bring them all the way in and show them the different stations and everything like that, how it's all buffet style, just like it is at the Gretzky over at St. Ben's. And here, sometimes I talk about Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner and how those are really amazing events on campus. And then oftentimes I'll talk about the quad as a whole and how this is the bottom floor. I'll talk about the types of classes that are in the quad and how you'll most likely have a class in here at some point during your college career.
Okay, so now we are in the Great Hall. On that walk from the refectory to the Great Hall, you can point out this Stephen B. Humphrey or the SBH, and that's a space you can kind of talk about our music requirement, talk about our fine arts experiences, talk about the different groups that they bring in, or our band and orchestra, how they can become a part of that too. Another thing that you can talk about on that walk is the fact that this used to be our old church before the Abbey was built in the, I want to say the early 60s, 50s. It's in the 50s, and which is something you can check up in the handbook. And then it kind of depends on the time if you can come into here, because typically group tours will be picked up outside of the Abbey, but I always bring my group in here just because it's a really pretty space, and they kind of like to see the difference between a more traditional church versus our Abbey church. And things that I talk about in here are the different events that go on, our Christmas concert that is really popular, our Thanksgiving dinner that occurs here, and the big long tables. We kind of say that it looks like Hogwarts during that time, which people sometimes like that. Talk about that our admission office is right down the hall, and the quad and our health center, our different classes that happen in there. The information desk. What else do we talk about in here? I think that's pretty much it. People really like to see this space, so I recommend going. And then you can lead them out to the Abbey, where you can finish up your tour. At the end of your tour, remember to try to shake everyone's hand and say thank you for coming. And if they want to get an individual tour, if you're in a group tour, make sure that you say that. Be like, come back, do an overnight, sit in on a class, meet with a professor, tell them all the different things that they're able to do outside of these big group tours. Another thing is just say that if you need anything, you can email me if you're comfortable doing that, because it makes it a little more personal for them as well. All right. Thank you for tuning in with us today on our St. Ben's and St. John's tour.
Remember that you still have to schedule, wait, what?
We still have to do a shadow tour, so get in contact with Abby or I to set that one up. Typically we can do it, especially in the fall during our before our football games. That will really show you the route, and you can pick up on other tour guides' stories or something. We just wanted this to give you an overview of all the spaces that you're going to be covering on tour.
Best of luck with your first tours, you guys. You're going to do amazing. Don't be nervous. Remember that you always have these videos to look back on for the future, just in case you ever forget what to say on a tour. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh my gosh.